Welcome back to Crazy HOA Moments. I brought proof and she brought a truck. I do not care what you were told at move-in. Ann Jones shoved the barcode scanner toward my contractor's truck windshield like it was a weapon, her voice cutting through the humid Pembroke Pines afternoon. The scan result said tow and she trusted the scan. That was her entire argument. She did not care that I had given my contractor a guest pass that morning, did not care that the truck was on my property, did not care that I was standing right there watching her call a tow company on speakerphone while she blocked my driveway with her golf cart. The Ironwood Trails HOA board had turned parking enforcement into a blood sport, and Ann, the architectural committee chair, was the referee with a whistle and a god complex. I work as a mortgage loan officer, so I understand lien consequences better than most people in this neighborhood. I know what happens when disputes escalate into collections, when fees compound into legal nightmares, when a single mistake on a title report can sink a closing. That knowledge should have protected me. Instead, it made me a target. Ann hated anyone who asked questions, anyone who read the covenants closely, anyone who pointed out that the rules she quoted did not actually exist in the documents. She had been committee chair for 3 years, long enough to build a network of vendors who owed her favors and a reputation for public shaming anyone who crossed her. The HOA meetings were theater. She would project photos of alleged violations onto a screen, call out unit numbers, and invite the board to pile on with sarcastic commentary, while the accused homeowner sat in silence. My mental health had been fragile for months before this started, anxiety spiking every time I saw her golf cart doing late-night patrols with its blinking amber light sweeping across driveways like a prison searchlight. The harassment was pushing me to the edge, and she knew it. The contractor truck had been parked in my driveway for 2 hours. My guy was inside repairing a bathroom exhaust fan, a job I had scheduled weeks ago and logged in the HOA portal as required. Ann did not care about the portal entry. She cared about the barcode sticker on the windshield, a guest pass I had printed from the HOA system that morning. She waved her scanner at it, watched the screen flash red, and announced that the system flagged it as invalid. Commercial vehicle, she said, tow on site. I told her the truck was clearly marked with a licensed contractor logo, that I had followed every rule, that she could not just override the guest pass system because she felt like it. She smiled and said, "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants." That line became her mantra. Every time I pushed back, she repeated it, sometimes word for word, sometimes with a little laugh at the end like it was a punchline only she understood. The tow truck arrived in under 10 minutes. That told me everything. Ann had a standing relationship with the vendor, probably got a kickback for every vehicle they hauled. The driver pulled up to the curb, sized up the situation, and asked Ann if she had the authorization paperwork. She held up her clipboard and said the scan result was authorization enough. The driver hesitated, glanced at me, then back at Ann. I could see him doing the math, weighing the risk of a wrongful tow lawsuit against the promise of a quick payday. Ann insisted the tow was authorized, and the tow driver hesitated. But she pulled out her phone, made another call, and suddenly the driver was hooking up the wheel lift. I told the driver I would hold him personally liable, that I had documentation proving the vehicle was authorized, that this was theft under color of authority. He ignored me. Ann smiled wider and said, "You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee." That line hit me like a slap. It was not just about the tow. It was about the cascade of costs she knew would follow. The tow yard storage, the retrieval fee, the administrative fee the HOA would tack on, the fine for having a violation in the first place, the appeal fee if I dared dispute it. She had engineered a system where even winning cost more than losing. The contractor came out of my house just as the truck lifted off the ground. He stared at the scene, then at me, then at Ann. "What is happening?" he asked. Ann turned to him and said his vehicle was illegally parked and he should have checked with the office before coming on site. He held up his phone, showing the text thread where I had confirmed the appointment and told him to use my guest pass. Ann said guest passes did not cover commercial vehicles and walked away. The tow truck pulled out, my contractor's truck swaying on the lift, and I was left standing in my driveway with a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. I let her talk because every word was helping me. I did not know it yet, but that restraint would become my greatest asset. The management office closes at 5, and it was 4:15. I had one shot to deliver the dispute packet in person before the cutoff, one chance to get my case on record before Ann could bury it in procedural delays. I ran inside, grabbed my laptop, and started pulling files. Photos of the guest pass printout, screenshots of the portal entry, the contractor's business license, his insurance certificate, the text thread confirming the appointment. I burned it all to a thumb drive, printed 2 copies of everything, and drove to the management office on the north end of the community. The office was a low brick building next to the clubhouse, staffed by a single property manager who looked exhausted every time I walked in. Her name was Lisa, and she had worked for 3 management companies in 5 years because the Ironwood Trails Board chewed through vendors like Anne chewed through homeowners. Lisa took my packet and flipped through it without much interest. She said the tow was already logged in the system as a valid enforcement action and reversing it would require board approval. I asked who authorized the tow. She said Anne, as committee chair, had authority to call tows for violations under her purview. I asked where that authority was written. She could not answer. I asked for a copy of the tow authorization form Anne submitted. Lisa said there was no form, just a phone call. That was the crack I needed. I told Lisa I wanted a formal hearing under the dispute resolution process outlined in the covenants. She sighed and said she would schedule it, but the next available date was 3 weeks out. 3 weeks of storage fees piling up at the tow yard. 3 weeks of Anne telling everyone at the pool that I was a scofflaw who parked commercial trucks in violation of community standards. I left the office with a hearing date and a growing sense that the system was designed to break me before I could ever get a fair shot. That night, I got my contractor's truck out of the tow yard. It cost me $412, including the hookup fee, the mileage charge, and 1 day of storage. The tow yard operator handed me a claim ticket and told me the HOA had a contract with them that indemnified the company against wrongful tow lawsuits. I asked if he had a copy of the contract. He said no. I asked if Anne had provided written authorization. He said she called it in and that was good enough. I took photos of everything, the ticket, the invoice, the release form, and added them to my evidence file. The contractor was furious. He said he had never dealt with an HOA this aggressive, that he had worked in gated communities all over South Florida and none of them scanned guest passes like airport security. I apologized and promised to cover his costs. He said he would finish the job but never come back. I did not blame him. The next morning, a brand new fine appeared on my account in the HOA portal. Unauthorized commercial activity, $250. No vote, no hearing, no warning. Just a line item with a due date 2 weeks out and a note that failure to pay would result in a lien. I called Lisa and asked where the fine came from. She said the architectural committee had the authority to levy fines for violations under their jurisdiction and the portal updated automatically when they submitted the paperwork. I asked to see the paperwork. She said it was filed electronically and she would email me a copy. The email never came. I called again the next day. Lisa said she was still waiting for Anne to forward the documentation. I filed a formal records request under Florida statute. Lisa said the HOA attorney would handle it and I should expect a response in 10 business days. That was the game. Delay, deflect, bury me in process until I gave up or missed a deadline. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA battles where the paper trail wins. I started building my comparison photo set that weekend. I walked the neighborhood with my phone, photographing every driveway, every guest vehicle, every contractor truck, every landscaping trailer, every parked car that could possibly violate the rules Anne claimed to enforce. I found 12 driveways with contractor vehicles parked exactly like mine had been. I found 8 guest cars without visible passes. I found 2 moving trucks blocking the street. None of them had fines. None of them had been towed. I compiled the photos into a single document with timestamps and GPS coordinates, cross-referenced them with the HOA violation log I pulled from the public records portal, and proved that enforcement was arbitrary and targeted. It was not about rules. It was about Anne picking winners and losers based on who stayed quiet and who asked questions. A neighbor named Marcus stopped me on one of my photo walks. He lived 3 doors down, a retired firefighter with a doorbell camera that covered half the block. He said he saw Anne at my property the night before the tow, moving around my driveway with a flashlight, checking the truck from multiple angles like she was building a case. He said it happened to him too, 2 years ago, when he hired a plumber and Anne called a tow while the guy was still inside his house working. Marcus fought it, got the tow reversed, and then Anne hit him with a string of petty violations over the next 6 months until he sold his house and moved. He said he wished he had kept better records, that he would testify at my hearing if I needed him. I thanked him and asked if he still had the doorbell footage. He said his system only kept 30 days, but he would check. 2 days later, he sent me a clip. It showed Ann in the frame at 11:43 at night, walking around my driveway with a flashlight beam cutting across the contractor truck's license plate, stopping to take photos with her phone, then walking back to her golf cart with the blinking amber light. The timestamp was the night before the tow. The footage was gold. The escalation hit fast. A week before my scheduled hearing, I got a letter from a collections agency claiming I owed the HOA $617 in unpaid fines, fees, and interest. The letter threatened to report the debt to credit bureaus and initiate lien proceedings if I did not pay within 15 days. I called Lisa and told her the fees were disputed and under appeal. She said the collections process was automatic once an account went unpaid past 30 days, and I should have paid under protest if I wanted to avoid it. I asked how I could owe 30 days past due when the fine was issued 11 days ago. She put me on hold, came back, and said there was a clerical error and she would notify collections to pause the case. The pause never happened. 3 days later, I got a second letter with an added late fee. Then someone moved a new violation notice onto my door. It was dated a week earlier, claiming I had failed to respond to a prior warning about unapproved landscaping. I had never received a prior warning. I checked my doorbell footage and found the moment the notice appeared. Ann in her golf cart at 6:42 in the morning, walking up to my door with a folded paper, taping it on, and leaving. The date on the notice was backdated by 7 days. She had fabricated a failure to respond violation to stack another fine. When I showed Lisa the footage, she said she was shocked, promised to investigate, and then did nothing. Ann kept showing up at board meetings, kept smiling, kept enforcing. The system protected her because the system was hers. The first set piece hit at the next board meeting. I showed up with Marcus, my evidence binder, and a laptop ready to screen share my comparison photo set. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a beige room with folding tables and a projector screen. Ann sat at the head table with 3 other board members, all of them looking at me like I was wasting their time. I requested time during the homeowner comment period. The board president, a man named Gerald who owned a car dealership and spent most meetings checking his phone, said I had 3 minutes. I pulled up my laptop and started the screen share, walking through the comparison photos one by one. Driveway after driveway, contractor truck after contractor truck, zero enforcement. I asked Ann to explain why my truck was towed when 12 others were not. She said my truck was flagged by the scanner system as non-compliant. I asked where the scanner system was documented in the rules. She said it was an enforcement tool, not a rule. I asked to see the rule that authorized selective enforcement. Gerald cut me off and said my time was up. Ann leaned into her microphone and said, "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants." The room was silent. Marcus stood and said he had witnessed the same selective enforcement and had footage. Gerald banged a gavel and said the comment period was closed. I tried a different angle. I asked for a live demonstration of the scanner system. I said if the system was reliable, Ann should be able to scan a valid guest pass in front of the board and show that it worked correctly. Gerald said that was not on the agenda. I said it was directly relevant to my dispute. Ann said the scanner was proprietary and she was not required to demonstrate it. I asked who owned the scanner. She said the HOA did. I asked where it was purchased. She refused to answer. Marcus asked if the board had approved the purchase. Gerald said personnel and vendor matters were executive session topics and not open for discussion. I realized the scanner might not even be real, that Ann might be waving a handheld inventory tool from a retail store and claiming it was an enforcement system. I could not prove it in that moment, but I filed the theory away. The second set piece came a week later. I was driving home from work when I saw Ann in the gatehouse lane near the entrance, standing next to her golf cart with a folding sign stand. She was trying to plant a no parking sign in the landscaping strip, pounding a metal stake into the mulch with a mallet. I pulled over, got out, and started recording with my phone. I asked what she was doing. She said the board had authorized additional signage to clarify parking restrictions. I asked for the board resolution. She said it was passed in executive session. I asked if she had a permit from the county for the sign installation. She ignored me and kept pounding. I walked closer and saw that the sign had no county permit sticker, no manufacturer label, nothing to indicate it was an official traffic control device. I asked if she planned to enforce parking restrictions based on a sign she installed herself without approval. She turned and said I was harassing her, that she would call the police if I did not leave. I kept recording. She pulled out her phone and made the call. A sheriff deputy arrived 15 minutes later, talked to both of us, and told Ann that she could not install signage on HOA common property without board approval documented in meeting minutes. She argued. He repeated the rule. She packed up the sign stand and left. I sent the video to Lisa with a formal complaint and a demand that Ann be removed from the committee for unauthorized signage installation. Lisa said she would forward it to the board. Nothing happened. The twist came 3 days later when I logged into the HOA portal to check my account. The violation entry that triggered the tow had been edited. The original timestamp said the violation was observed at 2:14 in the afternoon. The new timestamp said 11:53 in the morning, over 2 hours earlier. The change pushed the violation time to before my contractor arrived, which would have made the tow technically invalid even under Ann's twisted logic. I took screenshots showing the edit metadata, which included Ann's user ID and the date of the change. She had edited the record after I filed my dispute, trying to backdate the violation to cover her mistake. I forwarded the screenshots to Marcus, to Lisa, and to the HOA attorney with a subject line that said evidence of record tampering. The attorney responded within an hour asking for a phone call. I called. He told me the board was taking the matter seriously, that record tampering was a breach of fiduciary duty, and that he would recommend an independent audit of all enforcement actions Ann had initiated in the past 2 years. He also told me to stop communicating with Lisa and direct all future correspondence through his office. That was the moment I knew I had leverage. The hearing kept getting postponed. First, it was rescheduled because Ann claimed a family emergency. Then it was rescheduled because the board could not get a quorum. Then it was rescheduled because the attorney said he needed more time to review the evidence. Meanwhile, the collections letters kept coming, the late fees kept piling up, and my anxiety kept spiking every time I saw Ann's golf cart creeping through the neighborhood at night with that blinking amber light. Marcus started walking with me on my evening jogs, partly for solidarity and partly because he was worried Ann would escalate to property damage or false police reports. He said he had seen her do it to other homeowners, planting evidence of violations and then photographing it as proof. I installed 2 more cameras on my house, covering every angle of my driveway and front door. The trump card I had been holding was a call recording. Florida is a 2-party consent state, but I had recorded a conversation with the tow company dispatcher 3 days after the initial tow. I called pretending to be a prospective HOA looking for a tow vendor and asked about their contract with Ironwood Trails. The dispatcher, eager to make a sale, told me they had a standing agreement with Ann personally, that she would call in tows without submitting the required authorization paperwork, and that they split the revenue 50-50 under the table. He said it was a sweet deal because the HOA never audited the invoices, and the homeowners always paid. I recorded the whole conversation, 23 minutes of him describing the scam in detail, bragging about how many vehicles they towed per month, and complaining that Ann sometimes called in questionable tows that put them at legal risk. I did not reveal the recording to anyone until the final showdown, because I knew it would only work if I deployed it at the moment of maximum impact. That moment came when Ann blocked traffic in the gatehouse lane while screaming into her phone. It was a Thursday afternoon, rush hour, and I was coming home from work. Ann's golf cart was parked sideways across the lane, blocking both directions. She was standing next to it with her phone pressed to her ear, yelling at someone about a tow authorization. A line of cars was backed up behind her, horns honking, drivers leaning out windows. I pulled up behind the line and got out. Marcus was 2 cars back and did the same. We walked up to the golf cart. Ann saw us and pointed, shouting that I was in violation again, that she had just scanned another vehicle in my driveway and called for an immediate tow. I asked what vehicle. She said a landscaping trailer. I told her I did not have a landscaping trailer. She said it was parked in my driveway at that moment. I pulled up my doorbell camera app and showed her the live feed. My driveway was empty. She said the scanner did not lie. I told her I had proof she was fabricating violations and I was done playing games. She screamed that I was harassing her and she would have me arrested. Marcus stepped in and said he had footage of her editing records, installing unauthorized signage, and trespassing on my property at night. She turned on him and said he was a disgruntled former homeowner with no standing. The cars behind us kept honking. A sheriff deputy pulled up, the same one from the sign installation incident. He asked what was going on. Ann said I was blocking her from performing her HOA duties. I said she was blocking traffic and making false tow requests. The deputy told Ann to move the golf cart. She refused until he threatened to cite her for obstruction. I went home, compiled everything into a single packet: the comparison photos, the doorbell footage, the collections letters, the tampered portal screenshots, the sign installation video, Marcus's testimony, and the tow company call recording. I submitted the packet to the HOA attorney with a cover letter outlining a formal demand: reverse all fines, remove Ann from the committee, audit the tow vendor contract, and issue a written apology. If they refused, I would file a lawsuit for harassment, wrongful towing, record tampering, and breach of fiduciary duty, and I would send the call recording to the State Attorney General's office for investigation of kickback fraud. The attorney called me 2 hours later and said the board wanted to meet. I said no. I told him I wanted a written response within 72 hours or I would file. He said he would get back to me. The response came in 48 hours. The board voted to remove Ann from the architectural committee effective immediately, void all fines and fees on my account, terminate the tow vendor contract, and hire an independent auditor to review 2 years of enforcement actions. They also agreed to pay my tow yard costs and my contractor's lost time. The letter included a clause saying the board took no position on the allegations but was acting in the interest of community harmony. It was not an apology, but it was a win. Ann tried to fight it, showing up at the next board meeting to demand a revote. Gerald told her the decision was final and asked her to leave. She refused. He called for a recess and had building security escort her out. Marcus and I watched from the back row. He leaned over and said, "You did it." I said, "Not yet." The final piece came when I filed a civil petition for a temporary restraining order based on the harassment pattern. I attached the full evidence packet, including the call recording and Marcus's testimony. The judge granted the order within a week, barring Ann from initiating any enforcement action against me, contacting me directly, or entering my property. The order also required the HOA to implement a neutral third-party process for all towing decisions, with written authorization and homeowner notice required before any vehicle could be removed. The insurance company that covered the HOA sent a risk warning to the board after reviewing the case file, stating that continued use of unauthorized enforcement tools and vendor kickback arrangements could void the liability policy. That insurance risk warning made the board panic. They hired a new management company, rewrote the enforcement procedures, and installed an oversight committee to review all fines and tows before they went into effect. Ann resigned from the board entirely a month later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to a condo in Fort Lauderdale where she could not terrorize anyone with a barcode scanner and a golf cart. The funny karma moment came when the independent auditor found that Ann had ordered over 60 tows in 2 years, and only 18 of them met the criteria outlined in the covenants. The rest were either fabricated violations or targeted harassment. The board had to refund thousands of dollars to affected homeowners, and the tow company lost its contract with every HOA in the region after word spread about the kickback scheme. Ann lost her committee role immediately, and the fallout destroyed her reputation in the community management world. The HOA removed the enforcement action and voided the ledger entry on my account, wiping it clean like the whole nightmare never happened. I still live in Ironwood Trails. The neighborhood is quieter now. The new management company does not do late-night patrols, does not use barcode scanners, and does not treat parking enforcement like a military operation. I see Marcus a few times a week, usually at the mailboxes or on evening walks. We do not talk about Ann much anymore, but every time a contractor parks in my driveway without incident, I think about how close I came to losing that fight. The covenants are still there, the rules are still enforceable, but the difference now is that enforcement is fair, transparent, and documented. That is all I ever wanted. Take care, and I will catch you in the next one.